Bing has asked me to give some of my ideas about the history of our organization. This is going to be my recollections, and so it's not really a history of the organization. It's the way I saw it and the way I participated in it. My experience is kind of blurred between things that I did on my own and things that I did as part of the organization or things the organization did. It's also blurred between organizations. I was on the board of the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association, the Center for the Book, the Friends of the State Museum, and the Friends of Loren Eiseley all at the same time. And all of those organizations had an Isley element to them. And so a lot of the things that I did, I'm not sure which organization I did them with. There are two periods that cover the history of the Friends of Loren Eiseley. There's the first period, and then there's the period when Bing came in and took over, which is the period that we're in now. What happened was that we were very successful for a long time, and then suddenly we found ourselves with all of our management leaving town. And one day I woke up and found out I was the only board member left. And so I called a meeting of whoever was left in town that was old people, and Ruth Thone was a principal in that conversation, and we decided we were going to abandon the Friends of Loren Eiseley. That happened early in the year, and then in September, Bing showed up with a whole new idea and a board of directors and a program to follow, and so we had a renaissance. My comments are only about the first period. The period with the revival under Bing is a topic for another discussion. The other thing I want to say is that I'm not dealing with this chronologically because I wanted to talk about things together and it just didn't work chronologically. So the last thing I want to say is I want to kind of introduce my cousin Walter Merrill because he's going to be introduced in the thing as we go along. Walter was a professor at Drexel, and if you know the area out there, the University of Pennsylvania where Isley was and Drexel are basically on the same piece of land, and when you walk from the one campus to the other, you don't know you've done it. So Walter was very much in the faculty swims, the faculty social swim, and he had a lot of contacts. And so there were things that I did with my cousin that I'll refer to in the paper, and I wanted you to know who he was. So now to get started, we'll deal with the prehistory. How did it all get started? Well, in the 1970s, Charlie and Ruth Thone were in Washington because Charles was the congressman for this district. While they were there, Ruth was gifted with a copy of The Immense Journey, and she read it and was incredibly impressed by it. Now, there's a thing in Washington called the Nebraska Society of Washington, D.C., and the Thones were very active with this, of course. And one of the things that they do annually is they have a Nebraskan of the Year. And so Ruth got the idea that that should be Loren Eiseley. And so she gave copies of The Immense Journey to all of the committee, and the committee agreed, and that's why Mabel and Loren came to Washington to receive his honor. Well, the Thones came back to Nebraska when Charlie went for governor. And so one day, I found myself in a meeting in the governor's mansion. I can't have any idea how I got there, but I think it was because Bert Schultz was the one that sent me. And that was a meeting which resulted in the agreement that we should have a Friends of Loren Eiseley, and the organization was subsequently founded. The founders of our organization were Ruth Thone, Joanne Kimball, Dick Herman, and Bert Schultz. Ruth, of course, was our first president, and she served in that capacity for a good long time. Joanne Kimball was a dear friend, but she left town very soon after we were founded, and so she really didn't have much to do with our early history. Dick Herman was a critically important person for us. He was with the Lincoln Journal. Sadly, at this time last week, we were attending services for Dick Herman. When Dick died Jackie, his wife, gave me a letter that Isley had written, Dick, and I have copies of that, which I'm going to share with the people that are here. I was able to find the letter itself is to thank Dick for writing an essay, a review of the Night Country, and I have a copy of that review with the letter. Bert Schultz, of course, is pretty important in the Isley history because Bert and Loren were classmates. They were both in school at the same time. Bert was, of course, studying in the sciences. He was a geology person, and Loren was an English major. And Bert is the one who convinced Irwin Barbour, who was the one who sent the fellows out to do the digs. He convinced Irwin Barbour that Loren would be a good person to send out with what became the Old South Party. It took some convincing, because why would you send an English major on a scientific expedition? But Bert was very convincing, and that's why Loren went. So the first, I attended various meetings which were involved in forming the organization. I was not on the board immediately, but I've been a member from the very beginning, and I was on the board probably in the second year. The first event we had, I don't think actually was put on by the Friends of Loren Eiseley. There was a thing called the Celebration of Loren Eiseley, which was done here in the Heritage Room. And it was put on by the Lincoln City Library, which of course was the Heritage Room, and the Junior League of Lincoln. In the formation of the Heritage Room, the ladies of the Junior League played the yeoman's role to get this organization going. That is the the Heritage Room operation. And so when we formed our first Nebraska Literary Heritage Association board, it was packed with Junior League members. This meeting that we had was quite an elaborate affair, and I have brought programs from that meeting which the folks here can share, and so you could pass those out. It was a wonderful program, and it was the person who was in charge of it all was Pam Gosson, who happened to be the daughter of one of my beloved colleagues. Pammy is now in Norman, Oklahoma, and she is a noted historian of science, and she's written quite a bit on Isley. But that was our first meeting, and it was a very successful event. I'm going to start now by telling something of the Isley presence in Lincoln. He certainly was associated with Morrill Hall, and Isley is represented in Morrill Hall, and you can go see that today. The innocent assassin is the thing you're all familiar with. That's the 25-million-year-old cat fight that was where Isley discovered this fossil in the Wildcat Hills. The Chimney Rock Historical Center has quite a bit of display on the innocent assassin, and that has all been done through the efforts of our board member Ray Boyce. If you will look at the innocent assassin, and you go into the Morrill Hall, if you do a right turn, you'll go down to where the children's place is, and right in that area you're going to find that fossil. If you're looking at that and you'll do a 180-degree turn and look just a tad to your left, you'll see the heavy-headed beast of the gone time, as Isley called it. And this is the Scottsbluff bison. The Scottsbluff bison was, the site was worked by Bert and Loren, and the first publication, scientific publication that appeared in a journal was, the subject was the Scottsbluff bison. The Scottsbluff bison was the subject of his master's thesis, and I think the article in the American Anthropologist was basically all taken from Isley's thesis. The interesting thing about that was that the article caused enough stir that they actually had to print a second article and revisit the first article and give some additional information. The thing that's unique about the Scottsbluff bison is that when they discovered the fossils, they discovered projectile points with the beasts. And what this did was it proved that man had been in the area thousands of years earlier than had been understood at that time. The other thing, the innocent assassin, of course, is associated with Isley. The Scottsbluff bison is not. When I was on the board, I got a promise from the management at the museum that they would put a little thing in there that told that Bert and Isley had gotten this thing, and they promised me they would do it when they reworked that exhibit, and they're all gone now, and I'm gone, and I don't think it's going to happen. But the Milford mastodon is another story. The Milford mastodon is a skull of a particular kind of elephant that was a different species of all the fellows that were around here. And the Milford mastodon was stuck in a bank at a creek that's out by Milford. In February, when we had a thaw, the thing just fell out of the bank. And so the museum had to do a real hurry-up deal. And they sent Bert and Loren out to recover this thing. And now, if you go into the Elephant Hall and you see the big mural of Mark Markison's, of Archie, the big elephant, if you go to the right, you'll find the Milford mastodon on the floor and the Milford mastodon skull. One of the triumphs of my career on the board over there was that I really did get them to do a little write-up about how Loren and Bert found that thing, and so now the Milford mastodon is identified with Loren. The other thing that's over there is the Fairberry flower. Now, this is the world's oldest complete flower fossil. Peggy Bolick was the paleobotanist at that time, and I conned her into the idea that it would be really neat if we displayed that thing with a quotation from How Flowers Changed the World. And so that's the way it looks, and I'm very, very pleased about that. It's in the Mesozoic Gallery. People that I knew or met is a topic that I cover for now. The Old South Party, I knew everybody in the Old South Party except Eugene Vanderpool. I never met him. Robert Long was was one of the Old South Party. You know, the South Party was the one that Barbour sent out to the party of college kids that Barbour sent out on fossil hunts. Robert Long was a medical doctor, lived in Omaha, and I'm pretty sure that he was the medical director of Mutual of Omaha, but I'm not sure. He certainly had a connection with Mutual of Omaha. He was a nice fellow, and he attended our early meetings, and so I saw him quite often. Frank Craybill is a man that I can't say I really knew, but I was in the presence more than once, and he talked on our series, on our Isley programs in the early days. But the three that I knew long before I knew anything about Loren Eiseley were Bert Schultz and Emery Blue. Emery Blue was a local fellow who was in the real estate business, and Mylan Stout, who was on the faculty at the university. And so those were the people that we knew. The people who went on walks with Isley were Bill Gaffney. Bill was a good friend. Preston Holder, he was in sociology, but you remember that Loren graduated from sociology because that's where anthropology was taught. Anthropology was taught in the sociology department. Ken Forward was an English professor, and I really didn't know Ken. I'd seen him and I knew about him and all that sort of thing, but when he died, I bought a substantial portion of his library, and I became very good friends with Dorothy, his wife, and corresponded with her after she went east